Hello, Frizzle Fellowship. My first experience with Lord of the Rings came at age 6 when I picked up The Hobbit. And I read the entirety of that book. What was pulling me through the book was not so much me really loving it like I loved Magic Treehouse at that time, but just out of sheer determination because someone had told me that it was too advanced for me. And I liked it. I also thought that a lot of parts were long and boring, which I think is a very fair assessment of The Hobbit from a 6-year-old's perspective, wouldn't you say? And then I picked up The Lord of the Rings for the first time around age 9, and I got a little bit into the first book and I hated it and I gave up. And that has been the story of my experience with The Lord of the Rings again and again, where I've picked up the first book, Fellowship of the Ring, lots of times, and every single time I get a little bit into it and I'm so bored and frustrated and annoyed at it and I give up. But the last time that I tried to pick up Lord of the Rings and read it was like a decade ago. And over that time, between then and now, my reading taste has changed and I've come to appreciate slower paced books quite a lot more. So kind of my whole quest of today, of this video, of this week, however long it takes me to read Lord of the Rings, or at least the first book, and maybe more if I like it, is that I want to try to find a love for the Lord of the Rings. Because right now I don't have any, but I know that this series, this world is so beloved by fantasy lovers, and I love fantasy. And I really do think that my taste has changed enough that even though this is a book that me in my younger self really didn't like and thought was super boring and overhyped, I could love it now. So I want to try it out. I'm a little apprehensive about this whole project because of course there's in the back of my mind a little voice saying, but what if you hate it? I'm really hoping to love it. The entire purpose of this is to try to love Lord of the Rings, okay? But there is a chance that I'm not gonna love it, and I'm gonna come on here and be honest with you guys, okay? So there's a chance that this could become a rant video. I'm hoping it doesn't, but it could. And that prospect of poking the bear of the Lord of the Rings fandom in that way terrifies me. I have already had negative experiences with Lord of the Rings fans in the past. Oh, you don't like Lord of the Rings? You must not have just been reading it right. You must not have been understanding it right. And I'm not approaching Lord of the Rings trying to be a hater. I have just naturally become a Lord of the Rings hater through experiencing the books and also the movies. So I've tried to watch the movies a few times and I've never made it through one of them in its entirety. I know. And it wasn't even like the extended editions, though sometimes it was. Nest of blankets on the couch and have awesome food, and we do it when there's a thunderstorm outside and the perfect vibes all across the board, and I cannot make it through one of those boring, terrible movies. And the last time I tried was only a few years ago, so I can't even say that my taste in movies has changed dramatically since then. And still, I have other people say to me, well, you must not be watching the movies right. Did you really watch them with the Lord of the Rings fan by your side? Did you really watch them with the appropriate snacks and ambiance and blah, 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 blah? They're just boring movies, okay, guys? I want to love the books. I want to love the movies. I want to love all of it because it's so cool. It's such a foundational work of fantasy, and I love the genre of fantasy, and I want to love Lord of the Rings. So, in order to make this happen, we have a plan, because I'm going to give myself as much chances for success to love Lord of the Rings as possible. So, I've gathered some supplies. I have not one, not two, but 3 different versions of the audiobook on deck, ready to go, from different narrators that all have their different pros and cons. And I'm going to be trying out all of them, so I'll be giving you reviews not only of Lord of the Rings, but also of the different audiobook narrators as I go, which I'm very excited about this project. In case the audiobook narrators don't turn out, I've got the ebook lined up. I love reading ebooks, so that should be good too. There's quite a fun culture on the internet around recipes inspired by Lord of the Rings, and I would love to make some of those recipes. I've collected a bunch of different websites that specialize in Lord of the Rings recipes, which is such a cool idea. I love this fandom. I think as I'm reading the book, especially if I come across a dish described in the book that I want to try out, I'm going to make it and have some fun with that. I'll take you along for that journey. I'm also probably going to try watching the movies at some point. I don't know if I can commit to all the movies, just like I don't know if I can commit to all the books. If I'm liking them, I will continue on to the next one. How about that? So, the goal of all of this is to become a Lord of the Rings fan. Right now, I am a Lord of the Rings hater, and hopefully this video will be about positive transformation. We'll see. What this video is going to be, above all else, is honest. Let's start. So I've started The Fellowship of the Ring, I'm a few chapters into it, and now I understand that group of people who decides to skip prologues. Before, I never understood this position because in my mind, I was thinking like prologues in fantasy books often are just like a chapter 1 following a different person. They're usually very plot relevant. You need them to understand the larger epic scope of the story. Like they're important. Don't skip prologues. And then I got to the prologue here in Fellowship of the Ring. And you know what? I skipped it. Because it was like an hour of audiobook just explaining lore dumps about like hobbits or something. Explaining the entire plot of The Hobbit, the book, when you don't even really need it that much to understand this story. And like, it felt so extraneous, and pointless. And like, though I don't have a lot of experience with Lord of the Rings, I do have enough experience that I know the basic plot of The Hobbit. I've read it twice. I don't think I mentioned before, but I did reread it before I went and watched the first movie. I don't think I ever bothered watching the rest of the movies. I know enough that I felt confident in skipping this lore info dump that I wouldn't be lost. I have some mixed feelings on the book so far. I am really loving the Gandalf scenes. Like when he is with Frodo and they're discussing the ring and Gandalf is like warning him about all the dangers of this magic ring. Like it was genuinely creepy and really set an interesting tone and I loved it. All of these ominous warnings and like it's so powerful and evil that Gandalf doesn't even want to touch it. Like, ooh, it makes me excited to see where this is going. Like, I am very excited to see what will happen with this ring. I'm just also kind of almost pre-disappointed because my impression of the ring from the cultural osmosis that I've received is that it isn't going to be as awesome as this scene has made it seem. We'll see. Now, let's talk about the different audiobooks that I've listened to because I've tried out a few different ones and I'm ready to review them for you. This is actually a lot of fun. So I researched and I picked out 3 versions of the Lord of the Rings audiobook for me to try out. I started with the one that I thought I was going to like the least and worked my way up to the one I thought I was going to like the most. So let me tell you about them. The first one that I tried out is read by Rob Inglis. This, as far as I can tell, is like an older Lord of the Rings recording, but has stuck around because of a lot of people's nostalgic love for it. Listening to it, it was just kind of like an average older audiobook. Like I could tell that the audio quality was a little lower than I'm usually expecting, but it didn't bother me that much. But also just like the style is a lot less dramatized than the typical audiobook is today, where the narrator will kind of get into the different voices. One of the things that I really heard praised about the English version of the audiobook is that he put a lot of work into getting the songs right, but I wasn't that impressed with his rendition of the songs. It was fine, but honestly, I think the songs annoy me so much that even a good rendition of the songs, like whatever, I'm over them. So then after a chapter of that, I moved on to my next audiobook narrator, which was Andy Serkis. He is the guy who plays Gollum in the movies. I really liked his audiobook version here, where he definitely goes more into the dramatizing of the book, but not overkill that it's annoying. He does also sing the songs. I couldn't tell the difference in the quality of him in English's version, so honestly, definitely between those two, Serkis is a clear winner in my experience so far. He gives all the characters a distinctive voice, and he puts a lot of energy into his performance, so it really keeps the narrative flowing and keeps everything a little bit exciting at a higher pace there. Now, I also listened to a third version of the audiobook, and this is a fan project audiobook. I'll link it down below if you're interested in learning more, but this is a fan of The Lord of the Rings who recorded his own audiobook. He went above and beyond with the production. The audiobook is full of music from the movies, full of sound effects. Like when a character is talking across the room, it sounds like the character is coming from across the room. Like they're a little farther from the microphone. The echoes are a little different. Like all these little details like that. Like, so well done. And this is why I saved this one for last, because I assumed that this was going to be my favorite version of the audiobook, but it's not. It's definitely well done, and if you're the kind of person who likes this graphic audio kind of format, then like, yeah, it's a great one. But I found that I don't think it's for me. All of these sound effects, like for example, it mentions that birds are chirping in the background of a scene. And for that entirety of a scene, they'll be playing birds chirping sound effect. And it's just distracting and annoying to me. Like I'm having trouble even focusing on the story because of the birds chirping sound effect in the background. So, though it is an interesting and ambitious project, and like I applaud the person for putting so much work into it, it wasn't for me because I had a real hard time focusing on the story. So I have now switched back to the Serkis audiobook for the time being, as long as I'm going on this. So now I've reached 46% into the Fellowship of the Ring, and do I have some updates? So during my last update, I was feeling lukewarm about the book. There were some things that I was really liking and some things that were annoying me, and I focused a little bit more on the liking, but I think my predicted rating at that point was like 3 stars. You know, like I was liking it, not loving it. Now, 46% in, I gotta say my predicted rating is probably more like 2 stars. And I think a quote from The Fellowship of the Ring sums up my feelings at this point pretty well. They now feared a song or some poetry was now imminent, and they were getting bored. Do you know how many songs and poetry we've had in the last few chapters? It's been excessive and so annoying. I think the worst song of all so far has been the bath song, where our main characters are taking a bath, and then one of them just decides to sing a song about it, and not like in a good or clever way or like, oh, that was a nice catchy tune. It's boring. It's so bad. I hate it. But the reason that we've gotten so many in the last few chapters is that it's been like the Tom Bombadil chapters, which, imagine this, the hobbits have entered the dark old forest and the trees are out to get them. It's very creepy. I think something that Tolkien does really well, and I do want to emphasize here, is the mood of the scene. I was feeling genuinely afraid for our hobbits in here. There were monsters in the forest. There were trees trying to eat them. Like, I was wondering, how are they going to get out of this? They're going to have to like work together, find new courage within themselves. It's going to be a great character moment. Like, I was so excited to see it play out. And then you know what happens? The trees get the better of them. They're all about to like die and be eaten by trees. And then Tom Bombadil comes in to save the day. And Tom Bombadil talks almost exclusively in songs and chants and rhymes and poems, and the audiobook narrator sings them all. And I hate him so much. He's so annoying. And I think he's both annoying because he's always singing, but then he's also annoying because I was excited to see the hobbits have to overcome this difficult thing. And then Bombadil just shows up and rips them out of danger. And it's just like, no, you can stay at my nice house. There's nothing wrong with this house. We're totally nice. And then, you know, me, the savvy reader, is like, but is he though? Is he going to be secretly evil? This could be a fun twist. No, he's just nice. And then he's like, and if you guys get in trouble in the forest again, just sing me a song and I'll show up. And they get in trouble and he shows up and saves them. So he saves them twice. It feels like it so cheapens the feeling of danger and struggle in the narrative. I can put on my literature professor hat and say, I can see what Tolkien was trying to do with this character. He was showing that the hobbits at this point in their journey are very weak and they can't get themselves out of trouble, so they need help. Here is a godlike figure coming in and saving the day for them and not asking for anything in return, etc. And he's so nice and great. And I'm sure that there is some scholarly paper out there that is making that exact same argument. And I don't think it's necessarily wrong. I just think it's narratively unsatisfying that we are trying to root for these hobbits. And I think having them be saved like once to show how difficult the situation is, that they can't get out of it themselves at all, sure. But then having them get saved twice in the span of a few chapters by the same person, it feels so cheap. Like, are these characters just going to be journeying around and getting saved the entire time? Are they never going to have to do any like development and gain skills of their own? Is every time that they're in trouble, some random wizard is going to swoop in and save the day for them? And our hobbits are just as weak and unskilled as they were at the beginning of the book is annoying. Because I'm like halfway through the book, you think that something would have happened other than them just getting saved by now, you know? I think something that ties into all of this annoyance for me is that I don't feel like I really know any of these characters. Like, I know that people say that Frodo will make a good adventurer. I know that people have said that Frodo's a good hobbit, whatever that means, but like, I don't feel like I know any of his personality traits, and did it with everyone he's traveling with. Like, I know that Sam is kind of differential to the rest of the group, calling everyone Mr. Frodo, etc. And he's excited to go like see the world a little bit, but I don't feel like I've really got a handle on like who he is. And same with Merry and Pippin. Like, I know that one of them has gone out journeying a little bit farther than everyone else. I forget which one at this point, but that's about all I've got on them. They all like to eat. They like to sleep. It's so boring to me that I feel like I can't really get connected to any of these characters, and the plot is moving so slowly, and it's all songs, and nothing is really challenging our characters, because as soon as they get into a challenging situation, someone shows up to save them. Okay, let's table all of those complaints for a second. I realize that that was a lot, and I have a lot of feelings about how much I'm not liking this book. But let me tell you about a little thing that I am liking about this book, which is, at this point, we have reached the Pony Tavern and been introduced to the character of Aragorn, and I really am enjoying the entertainment value of how edgy Aragorn is. Now, I think at this point I'm supposed to be like impressed with his edginess, but honestly, I'm just kind of reading it as comedic. I don't think that's how the book's intending it, but I am laughing along with it. So Aragorn approaches Frodo and is like, hey, I'm gonna be part of your traveling team now because I said so and you need me. And then Frodo is like, no, you're not. Like, I do not trust you, random citizen. And then Aragorn is like, but don't you? You're talking to me. And I love the determination of Aragorn to be as edgy and dramatic as possible because it's just so funny to me. Like, why doesn't he just tell the truth here? Why doesn't he just like try to explain himself? No, he's too dramatic for that. He has a tragic backstory that involves a broken sword that he's carrying around for some reason. And I feel like if Aragorn made a little bit more sense in his motivations, then I might feel like his edginess was well deserved. But at this point, and it feels like he's really like keeping secrets just for the point of keeping secrets, not because he actually has a motivation to do so, then like it just feels edgelord at this point. But that is entertaining. And so it is the one thing I'm excited to see play out in this book right now. And I just keep laughing about the fact that he has this like prophecy rhyme associated with him and a broken sword that he's hauling around and he isn't going by his normal name and he refuses to tell anyone anything at any point. And like, I am excited to see the messes that the group gets into because of his ridiculous secrecy. How am I feeling about this book right now? I'm feeling like 2 stars about this book right now. I think if it wasn't Lord of the Rings, this is the point where I would be giving up on this book and DNFing. Because it is so beloved and I am determined to become a Lord of the Rings fan, I'm gonna keep going. Because I know that like, these are slow-paced books and there may be a greater payoff at the end, right? I'm hoping that there is a greater, please let there be anything happening in this book other than stupid Tom Bombadil and people keeping secrets for no reason and so many songs and boring scenes where the hobbits don't really have to face any consequences or do anything. Please, can we have anything happen in this book that changes the status quo of the hobbits, please? I'm disliking this book so much that I can't even really fathom like the Lord of the Rings fan. And I would love it. Like, help me understand, why do you love Lord of the Rings? Please let me know in the comments because like I want to have a good discussion about this. I want to better understand like why does someone like this? Because when I read it, I'm like, this is boring. It's just like the same beats over and over without anything happening because of them. They haven't really lost or gained anything in knowledge, in power, in emotional baggage, in anything. And I just want something to actually happen to them that has consequences. Okay, talk to you later when I'm farther into this book. Hopefully I have more positive things to say. I would really love to have positive things to say. I want to love these books. So, for a video about trying to love Lord of the Rings, I acknowledge that so far there hasn't been a lot of Lord of the Rings love. So, right here, right now, that's changing because I have made a list of everything I like about Lord of the Rings, and now I will tell you about it. I'm very diligently trying to love Lord of the Rings here, okay? So the first thing I thought of was I really love the horror suspense moments in this book. Like, thinking about Lord of the Rings, like horror and suspense are not the subgenres I would assign to it. And yet there are many moments in this book where the characters are hiding from the evil black riders, or where they're being chased, or where they're down in the creepy tunnels in the darkness, and they can hear the drum beats of the orcs coming towards them, where these quiet moments where Frodo is being tempted by the ring, and all these little moments of small horror, those are all of my favorite moments of the book. I think Tolkien just crafts those moments of suspense, of waiting to be gotten by the monster so well, I'm getting chills. Like, I imagine a parallel universe where Tolkien wrote more like fantasy horror instead of like fantasy travel log adventures, and I think I would love those books even more. Next thing I love about Lord of the Rings is the strong fandom. Like, in what other fandom can I search for recipes and find whole blogs dedicated to just Lord of the Rings recipes? The next thing that I really love about Lord of the Rings is that I can go read a bunch of other reviews, like for example on Goodreads, and both the 5-star reviews and the negative reviews for this book say, yeah, I almost gave up when I got to the Tom Bombadil sequences. And that is just like so validating to be able to go to the fandom and everyone to say like, yeah, no, you're right. There are some people out there that like the Tom Bombadil scenes, and I'm not saying that you're wrong, because everyone has their own taste, right? But it is incredibly validating to hear that I'm right for not liking them, because a lot of other people also don't like them very much. I also just have some admiration for the friendliness of Hobbit culture. It feels very cozy and fun, and I like it a lot. I also really love the mysterious and intimidating and powerful aura of the wizards, where it really feels like these are otherworldly beings that are immortal and are just leagues above most of the other characters in the book, and that is pulled off so well. The next thing on this list is I like that even though this book has a lot of songs and poems, you don't actually have to pay that much attention to them because they're usually not super plot relevant, and if they are, then they're summarized and explained later in the chapter by someone else usually. So it's nice that I don't have to put in so much brain power to them because I don't feel like I'm missing much. I like that about it. You might notice that a lot of these things on the list are a little bit bittersweet, and we're trying to love it, okay? Okay. My favorite character continues to be Aragorn. I think Gandalf is a close second, but Aragorn, like his dramatics, his righteous quest, like I want to know more and I want to follow him more because he, I think, is the most compelling character, mostly because it feels like he has a real personal stake in the quest that they're going on when not a lot of other characters do. I loved the moment when, as they're journeying, they come across these trolls that have been turned to stone, which happen in The Hobbit. There's a few little callbacks throughout this book to that book, and I feel like it's just the right amount. Like everyone else who's creating another story in the same world, come take notes at exactly the right balance of giving a little bit of references and fan service to the events of the past book without overcoming the entire plot with it. I like that a lot. I also think it's neat. I was reading this introduction by Tolkien, and he was talking about how a lot of the world building of Middle-earth started with languages and then came into the cultures and the story around it, because that's what he felt like people would want to read, and I do think he was mostly right with that. But I also just think it's neat that there exist like books and books out there about the world building and the linguistics of Lord of the Rings. It's fun to imagine that those are out there. I like it. I don't want to read it, but I like their existence. It creates this feeling of world building that's very like lived in and expansive. It really does feel like every culture in Lord of the Rings has so much background and backstory that I could go digging in if I wanted to. I also like that their pack pony that they're bringing along with them for a good portion of this quest, but not all of it, is named Bill. I just think that's funny. It's a nice little detail, and I like the consistent animal companions. And the last thing on the list, and I think the most important to this discussion right here, is that I've enjoyed the second half of this book a lot more than the first. Fellowship of the Ring is split into two parts, a book 1 and a book 2. And I've definitely enjoyed the pacing and the stakes in part 2 more than part 1. Part 2, now we're really into the quest. We know where we're taking the ring. We're gonna throw it in Mount Doom. We're assembling the team, and it feels like everything's really coming together, where it felt like the first half of this book, it was a lot of almost prologue-y feeling, like come on, get to the real plot already, and now it feels like we've got into the real plot already, and I'm liking it a lot. For example, the Moria sequence where they're battling orcs, where Gandalf like dies sacrificing himself for the team in a great show of wizarding power. So dramatic, so fun. And just like that creeping dread throughout that entire sequence, so well done. I also really like the sequence afterwards where they get into the magical elf forest, and then the elves there are not super welcoming to visitors, particularly to dwarves. And I think one of the reasons that I love that so much is that up until this point, it seemed like all the different fantasy races in this world were just kind of buddy-buddies. There wasn't any conflict there. It was kind of boring. And then suddenly now we have this conflict where the elves are incredibly prejudiced against the dwarves. And even if there's this dwarf that they have no reason to suspect is their enemy, they treat him like an enemy anyway. Incredibly compelling. And I'm really excited to see where this relationship between elves and dwarves go as we continue. I also have some negative things to say about the second half of this book so far, but I think I'm going to save them for a future clip because this one's all about trying to love Lord of the Rings, you know? And there are quite a few things that I am loving about this book. Just, it's not a majority of my thoughts on this book, let's say it that way. So let's keep reading. I'll check in with you later. So I have finished The Fellowship of the Ring, and let me tell you all about it. My first impression when I finished this is a little bit like, why do people love this so much? Like, genuine confusion. And I understand that part of people loving this is the bigger ending at the end of the trilogy, and it was all designed to kind of be read as one thing. But I also feel like it's fair to judge it on a book-by-book basis, because that is how it was published and consumed by most people. When other people are praising this book as the best thing they've ever read, what they usually are dwelling on is the feelings that the book evokes, the wonderful atmosphere of every scene. And I do think that this book does that exceptionally well. When you are in the fancy elf kingdoms, everything feels sparkly and peaceful and so magically beautiful. When you are in the deep dark mines, everything feels terribly spooky and dreadful. And like, that is definitely the strength of this book. I totally agree that when you're reading this, it feels like every character and place has so much backstory, hundreds of years of history behind them, and you just get glimpses into that. Certainly, the world building is extensive, but I don't feel like that makes this a good book. It's a nice feature of a book, but it doesn't make me enjoy the story. The Fellowship of the Ring feels more like a tone poem kind of book than a story kind of book. It's a collection of scenes built to make you feel the auras of the locations, and if that's what you're looking for in a story, like, it's great, I agree. But that's not a story to me. Like plot, who is she? Pacing is completely a mess in this book, and characters, like I understand that they're gonna get more arcs throughout the books, but even here and now, they all feel so flat. And I feel like this is one of my big nitpicks with the story as a whole, is it feels like Tolkien is scared to give his heroes flaws. There's a big division of the good guys and the bad guys. For example, remember one of the things I liked was getting the rift between the elves and the dwarves and exploring the racism there? Well, in our fellowship party, we have an elf Legolas and a dwarf Gimli, and this is such an easy opportunity for conflict and flaws, as there could be a real interesting meat of a conflict there. But this book never has them being rude to each other. They meet and have like zero interactions. Then you see the other elves being rude to Gimli. And then after that, it's like, and Legolas and Gimli were the best of friends. And then, like, that's not really shown much in the book either. They're just kind of civil to each other. And it feels like such a tragedy to me that there's so much potential to give our characters interesting flaws that they could overcome, but the author doesn't. The characters do experience a little bit of hesitation where they're homesick, where they kind of don't want to do this quest, but then they decide to do it anyway. And like, this book could have leaned in so much farther to that feeling of a real conflict at all, and it wasn't. I think that is what the heart of Lord of the Rings is really missing for me, is the sense of internal conflict, and it could also use some more external conflict. It's just like, I never feel like I really know the characters or root for them. It's just a panorama of cool places that they're visiting, along with lots of poems and songs, and like, I don't care about any of it. So now, of course, it is time for me to go watch the movies. I think I'm just gonna watch number one. I will not commit to more, just like I am not committing to more books. I don't think I would enjoy them, and I'm not gonna force myself through any more of this. But I am assembling friends for a Fellowship of the Ring watch party. Of course, I will serve gourmet mushrooms. And I'll check in with you after the movie with my thoughts on how it adapted the book and if I liked it more or less than the book. I think I'm gonna give Fellowship of the Ring 2 stars. I disliked most of this book. I didn't dislike all of it. There were some things that I liked about it, and so it doesn't get 1 star. It does get 2, but yeah. It's really disappointing because I really did want to find love for Lord of the Rings, and I think at the point where I'm at now, all I found was a more thorough, informed hater position on Lord of the Rings. We'll see if the movie changes any of that. Here is the Hobbit feast. We have garlicky mushrooms, tomatoey mushrooms, garlic bread, and potatoes with sausage. Very excited to eat this, and then with friends, watch Lord of the Rings while eating it together. So what do you want to hear about first, the mushrooms or the movie? Let's talk about the mushrooms first. They were yummy. Of the two, the garlic and the tomatoey ones, the tomatoey ones were more of a hit with everyone, including me, and I think at least part of that was because they also had cream cheese. That was definitely a good addition. But the real standout food of the night was the potatoes and sausage dish. That was the favorite of everyone. So, alas, we are not as much lovers of mushrooms as the hobbits are. Now the movie. I am so impressed with the movie. Now, of course, the big standout part is the score. Ugh, gorgeous. That music is great. But something that impressed me even more as someone who just read the book was how much they improved on the book. Like, the book is completely lacking in a feeling of drama. Yes, there are things happening, and occasionally there are even conflicts in the book. There's never really that feeling of drama, where characters are having big emotions, where things really feel like they're on the line, but the movie feels like that the whole way through. You're always feeling those characters' emotions, where things are always feeling on the line. I really appreciated how much, where there's more fight scenes, where there's more of characters disagreeing with each other, of all of these little moments that make everything so much more enjoyable in the movie than in the book. Now, that being said, I still think the movie's too long, but 3 hours is just simply too much movie for me. I don't like sitting down watching something for that long. But that being said, coming from someone who just read the book, I see how much they really cut out and how much longer it could have been. I'm like, wow, that was a good movie. I was kind of surprised that it wasn't a more faithful adaptation, but even though they changed so much from book to movie, I still feel like it was such a good capturing of what is good about Lord of the Rings and making that even better. As a feat of adaptation, of taking a source material that I felt like was honestly a little mediocre and then making an awesome movie out of it, 5 stars. As an actual enjoyable movie experience, I think I'd give it more like 3 stars. Like, I didn't actually love the movie. I felt like it was kind of boring and meandering and way too long. But the point is that I loved it so much more than the book, and I'm so impressed with how well they did it. I think another thing that the movie gave me was an understanding of how someone could love the Lord of the Ring books. Because if in you reading Lord of the Rings, you got that same feeling that the movie invokes of the beauty of all of it, of the beautiful score and the shots and the fun character moments, like, yes, I get it. I get the passion for the book now. I do not share it. I feel like just my taste and Lord of the Rings are mutually exclusive in a lot of ways. It's so much an atmosphere-focused book where if you're loving the world building and the vibes, I understand why this is a classic. It's just so not the classic for me. So I was really hoping to become a Lord of the Rings fan by the end of this video. You know, that was really my intention going in. I was really hoping that my changing taste in books, where I'm appreciating more slow-paced books, would help me love this slow-paced book. But I think what I really love more now is slow, character-driven books, and this just isn't that. I have so much respect for the Lord of the Ring fandom and so much respect for both the books and the movies, but I am still a hater. Thank you for being with me in my hater moments, especially if it pained you to hear it.